She had been dreaming of this day for as long as she could remember. The small town she came from seemed so far away now, and the streets she had walked 1,000 times felt like a distant memory. Today, she was standing outside a grand concert hall that gleamed in the sunlight, its tall windows reflecting the excitement that bubbled inside her chest. She clutched her sheet music tightly, her fingers brushing over the worn edges. This was the moment she had worked for, but now that it was here, nerves gnawed at her. The hall doors opened and a steady stream of people entered. Some were familiar faces from the music world, while others were simply drawn by the promise of an extraordinary performance. She could hear the chatter, the soft rustle of programs, the quiet laughter, all blending together into a background hum that made her heart beat faster. She felt small, almost invisible among the sea of confident, polished musicians. But she reminded herself why she was here. She had talent, she had practice, and most importantly, she had music in her heart. Backstage, she peeked through the curtains. The stage was vast, larger than she had imagined, with a grand piano sitting in the middle like a jewel under the lights. Every detail seemed perfect, every angle designed to impress, and she wondered if she truly belonged here. Her hands shook slightly, and she ran them over the keys, imagining the notes flowing smoothly, perfectly. Her breathing was shallow, but she tried to calm herself with the thought of the countless hours she had spent practicing in her small room at home, her fingers tracing melodies over an old, slightly out-of-tune piano. Then she noticed him, the famous pianist, the judge whose name was known in every music school, every concert hall, every magazine, was leaning against the railing, watching her with a look that made her stomach twist. He was famous for discovering talent but also for being brutally honest. Today he seemed amused. There was a smirk on his face, almost like he found her presence here entertaining. She tried to ignore him, tried to focus on the music, but the feeling of being judged, laughed at even, sent a shiver down her spine. She found a quiet corner and sat down, trying to collect herself. Memories of her journey flooded her mind. She remembered the mornings she woke before sunrise to practice, the evenings when her fingers ached but she kept playing, the times she had wanted to give up but didn't. She thought of her family, the support they had given her, the little sacrifices they had made to ensure she could follow her passion. All those memories strengthened her resolve. She wasn't here to impress anyone else. She was here to play the music that lived in her heart. The stage manager called her name. Her heart skipped a beat. She stood up, smoothing her dress and gripping her sheet music as if it were a lifeline. Every step she took toward the stage felt heavier than the last, but also filled with purpose. The lights were blinding as she stepped onto the stage. The audience was a blur of faces, some familiar, some strangers, but all waiting for something extraordinary. She took a deep breath, sat down on the piano bench, and placed her hands on the keys. A few moments of silence hung in the air. She could feel the eyes of the famous pianist on her, the weight of his judgment pressing down like a heavy fog. The smirk hadn't left his face, and for a second, doubt crept into her mind. What if she wasn't good enough? What if her nerves got the best of her? She closed her eyes for a brief moment and let the memories of her countless practice hours guide her. She thought of the music, the story behind each note, the emotion that had brought her here. Slowly, her hands began to move. The first notes were soft, tentative but confident. They floated through the hall, delicate and precise. The audience leaned in, caught by the unexpected grace in the music. Her fingers danced across the keys, each note carrying the essence of her journey, each chord a reflection of her passion. She could feel herself melting into the music, forgetting the nervous tension, forgetting the famous pianist's smirk. It was just her and the piano, the melody and the story she wanted to tell. Some in the audience exchanged surprised glances. She wasn't just playing notes. She was creating a world. Every crescendo and delicate pause spoke of countless hours of dedication, of dreams nurtured in the quiet corners of her small room. And slowly, even the famous pianist's expression began to shift. The amusement was still there, but now it was tinged with curiosity, a flicker of respect, as if he was realizing that the young woman on stage might be more than he had expected. Backstage, other musicians whispered among themselves, some quietly impressed, others uncertain how to react. The music carried a power that couldn't be ignored. It wasn't flashy or showy. It was heartfelt, honest, and deeply moving. Each note seemed to tell a story of struggle, perseverance, and hope. She felt herself growing stronger with each passing measure, her confidence building, her nerves transforming into pure energy and expression. As the piece continued, she lost herself entirely in the music. Her fingers moved with a fluidity that came only from years of dedication, from countless repetitions and sacrifices. The audience was silent, captivated, the weight of their attention making the hall feel alive, electric. Even the famous pianist leaned slightly forward, his gaze fixed, as if he were trying to understand the source of this unexpected talent. The final notes approached, soft yet powerful, filling the hall with a resonance that lingered long after the last key was pressed. Silence followed for a heartbeat, the kind of silence that made every listener hold their breath, unsure how to respond. And then, a gentle applause began, hesitant at first, then growing into a steady wave. She looked up, surprised, overwhelmed by the appreciation and the reaction she had earned. Her heart raced, not from fear anymore, but from a deep sense of accomplishment. The famous pianist stood slowly, clapping, his smirk replaced by a thoughtful smile. He nodded toward her, an acknowledgement that carried more weight than any words could. She had faced doubt, mockery, and fear, and through it all, she had let the music speak. In that moment, she realized that it wasn't about proving herself to anyone else. It was about honoring the music within her, and that was enough to leave a mark. As she walked off the stage, the applause still echoing in her ears, she felt a warmth spread through her chest. This was just the beginning, she knew. The journey ahead was long and full of challenges, but she had taken the first step, and she had done it with courage, with heart, and with a love for music that no doubt or laughter could ever diminish. After the performance, she returned backstage, her hands still tingling from the piano keys and her heart racing. The applause still seemed to echo in her ears, a reminder that she had just stepped out of her comfort zone and into something larger than herself. She felt a mixture of relief and disbelief. Could it really have gone that well? Had she actually managed to hold the audience in the palm of her hand? She took a deep breath and tried to steady herself. The other musicians were preparing for their performances, chatting quietly, tuning their instruments, and adjusting sheet music. Some glanced at her with curiosity, others with a hint of admiration, but she hardly noticed them. Her mind kept replaying every note she had played, every chord, every pause, every expression in her hands. The music had felt alive, almost like it had been flowing through her rather than coming from her fingers. That realization filled her with a quiet pride. But she also knew that this was only the beginning. The competition was still on, and the famous pianist who had mocked her at first was now watching more closely. She knew that the next moments would be just as important, if not more so. She remembered the look on his face when her final notes had lingered in the hall. There was a spark there, a recognition, but she also knew that admiration was not the same as acceptance. She needed to prove herself not only to the audience but to herself. She went to a quiet corner backstage and sat down, letting her thoughts drift. The journey to this moment had been long and full of challenges. She had started learning piano when she was very young, her fingers barely able to reach the keys, her small hands pressing down clumsily. She remembered the first teacher who had told her she had potential but needed discipline, the hours of scales and exercises that had seemed endless at the time. There had been times when she had wanted to quit, times when her hands ached and her eyes filled with tears from frustration. Her family had always been her support. They had encouraged her to keep going, to chase her dreams even when the world seemed too big and too overwhelming. They had sacrificed time, money, and energy to help her reach this point. She remembered evenings when her mother had stayed up late just to watch her practice, gently correcting her mistakes, or the quiet words of encouragement from her father when she felt like giving up. Every small victory, every moment of improvement, had been a step on the road that had led her to this stage. She thought about her first small performance in her hometown. The hall had been tiny, just a few dozen people, but the feeling of playing in front of others had been exhilarating. She had felt the same nervous energy she felt now, but back then, there had been no famous pianist to judge her, no audience of experts waiting to critique every movement. That experience had taught her that music was more than just notes. It was about connection, about sharing something from deep inside. Now she was about to perform again, and the stakes felt higher than ever. She could feel the tension in her shoulders and the fluttering in her chest. The famous pianist's gaze was always in the back of her mind, the memory of his smirk at her arrival still stinging slightly. But she refused to let that doubt take over. She reminded herself that she had prepared for this moment, that she had worked hard, and that her music had the power to speak for itself. She opened her music case and took out a new piece she had been practicing for months. A challenging composition that required both precision and emotion. It was demanding, but it was exactly what she needed to show her abilities. She spread out the sheet music, her fingers tracing the notes, and took a deep breath. She could feel her heart settling, her mind focusing. She remembered her teacher's words, "Play not just with your hands, but with your soul." That advice had guided her every step of the way, and now it felt more important than ever. The backstage assistant called her name again. She stood, smoothing her dress and taking one last deep breath. As she walked toward the stage, she felt the familiar surge of nerves mixed with excitement. The hall was buzzing with anticipation, and she knew that everyone was waiting to see what she would do next. Her steps were steady, her hands no longer trembling as much. She was ready. Once on stage, she faced the audience and the piano. The lights were bright, the hall silent except for the faint rustle of programs. She seated herself and positioned her hands over the keys. The famous pianist was in his seat, his eyes locked on her, a faint smile playing on his lips. She could feel his judgment, but instead of fear, she felt a quiet determination. This was her moment, and she would let the music speak. The first notes of her performance were slow and deliberate. She allowed herself to feel each one, letting the sound fill the hall. The audience leaned in, captivated by the unexpected emotion in her playing. She had chosen a piece that started softly but built gradually, giving her the chance to express every nuance. Her fingers moved with confidence, each chord resonating with clarity and passion. As the music unfolded, she felt herself slipping into a state where time seemed to stand still. She was no longer aware of the famous pianist's gaze, the audience, or even her own nerves. It was just her and the piano, the notes and the feelings they carried. Each phrase told a story of perseverance, of struggle, of hope, and of joy. She played with everything she had, allowing the emotion in her heart to guide her hands. The audience was completely absorbed. Some leaned forward, eyes wide, as if trying to catch every subtle shift in her playing. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. The energy in the hall was palpable, a silent connection forming between her and every listener. She could sense the shift, the way the music had begun to change the atmosphere, to draw people in, to make them forget everything else. Even the famous pianist's expression was changing. The smirk was gone, replaced by focus, curiosity, and eventually admiration. He had expected a performance that might be charming but unremarkable. Instead, he was witnessing something powerful, something genuine. She had caught him off guard, and there was a flicker of respect in his eyes. That small acknowledgement, though silent, meant more to her than applause or awards. It meant that she was being seen, truly seen, for the music she could create. The middle section of the piece was more challenging, requiring quick movements, precision, and control. She had practiced this passage countless times, and now, under pressure, it felt natural. Her fingers flew over the keys with confidence and grace. Every note was intentional, every pause meaningful. She could feel the audience holding their breath with her, experiencing the highs and lows of the music as if they were living it themselves. This connection, this shared experience was what made all the effort worthwhile. As she approached the final section, She allowed herself to add subtle flourishes, small touches that reflected her own interpretation of the music. It wasn't just about playing the notes correctly. It was about telling a story, conveying emotion, and leaving a lasting impression. She could sense the audience leaning in, the tension building, and she knew that the ending had to be perfect. She poured every ounce of feeling into the final chords, letting them ring out, powerful yet delicate, until the last note lingered in the hall. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then, slowly, the audience erupted into applause. Some stood, some clapped vigorously, and some wiped tears from their eyes. The sound of appreciation washed over her, a mix of relief, joy, and pride. She had done it. She had faced the fear, the doubt, and the judgment, and she had let her music speak for her. It was a victory not just for her talent, but for her courage and determination. As she stood and took a small bow, she caught the famous pianist's eye again. This time, the look was one of genuine respect. He nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement of her skill and her heart. Backstage, other musicians and attendees whispered among themselves, impressed by what they had just witnessed. She felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that she had proven to herself, more than anyone else, that she was capable of rising above doubt and mockery. She returned backstage, her hands still buzzing with energy, her heart full of a sense of achievement. This performance was only the beginning, but it had set the tone for what was possible. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more critics, more pressure. But for now, she allowed herself to savor this moment, to feel the warmth of accomplishment and the thrill of having shared her music with the world. She was ready to continue her journey, stronger and more confident than ever. The next day, she arrived at the concert hall earlier than usual, the excitement of yesterday still fresh in her mind. Today was another chance to perform, and she could feel the weight of expectations heavier than before. The famous pianist would be there again, and while the respect she had earned yesterday gave her confidence, the memory of his initial mockery lingered at the back of her mind. She knew that she would need to play even better today to leave a lasting impression. Backstage, she prepared herself in the quiet corner where she liked to focus. She ran her fingers over the keys of the piano, feeling the familiar grooves and texture beneath her hands. The sheet music lay in front of her, notes carefully arranged, waiting to be transformed into music. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, imagining herself performing flawlessly. Each day, each practice session, each small step of progress had led to this moment, and she refused to let doubt creep in. The other musicians were moving around, tuning instruments, sharing quiet conversation. Some glanced at her with curiosity, remembering her performance yesterday. A few gave her nods of encouragement, which she returned with a shy smile. Though she had earned some admiration, she also knew that the world of music was competitive, and that one good performance did not guarantee future success. Still, she let herself feel the thrill of the moment, the sense that she belonged here, even among so many talented performers. When the stage manager called her name, she rose, holding her sheet music with steady hands. Her heart raced, not from fear this time, but from anticipation. She walked toward the stage with careful steps, her shoes barely making a sound against the polished floor. The audience was settling in, murmuring softly, and she could see familiar faces from yesterday, their eyes filled with curiosity and expectation. She sat down at the grand piano, the keys gleaming under the bright lights. The famous pianist was in his seat, his posture calm, his eyes fixed on her. She felt the weight of his gaze but welcomed it, treating it as a challenge rather than a threat. She placed her fingers on the keys, feeling the familiar sensation that had always grounded her. The audience grew quiet, waiting, and she knew that the first note would set the tone for everything that followed. As she began to play, the music was gentle at first, a whisper of melody that invited the audience to listen closely. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, bringing out the nuances of the piece. Each note was carefully shaped, each pause deliberate. She could feel the story of the music unfolding beneath her hands, a story of hope, struggle, and determination. Her emotions flowed naturally into the performance, connecting her to every listener in the hall. The middle section of the piece was more complex, filled with rapid passages that tested her skill and control. She had practiced this section countless times, and now, under the pressure of the audience's gaze, it felt almost effortless. Her fingers danced across the keys, each movement confident and fluid. The audience responded, leaning forward, their attention captured completely. The hall was filled with a sense of quiet awe, the kind that comes from witnessing something both beautiful and unexpected. She glanced briefly at the famous pianist, and for the first time, she noticed a flicker of surprise on his face. His expression was no longer merely curious. It held admiration, a recognition of the talent and dedication before him. That small acknowledgement filled her with renewed energy. She continued playing, letting herself become completely absorbed in the music. Every note, every chord, was a reflection of her journey, the countless hours of practice, and the deep love she held for the piano. As the piece progressed, the audience was drawn deeper into the performance. Some closed their eyes, swaying slightly with the rhythm. Others leaned forward, following each subtle change in dynamics. She could feel their collective energy, a silent conversation between the music and the listeners. Her confidence grew with each passing measure, her initial nerves replaced by a calm focus and a sense of purpose. The climax of the piece approached, and she allowed herself to pour every ounce of emotion into the final passages. The music swelled, powerful yet delicate, carrying the intensity of her passion and the depth of her commitment. She could hear the audience's collective breath, the stillness that comes when everyone is held captive by the beauty of the performance. Even the famous pianist's eyes were wide, a clear sign that he had been deeply moved. The final notes were soft, lingering in the hall like a gentle echo. She held her hands above the keys, feeling the last vibrations of sound fade away. For a brief moment, there was complete silence, a pause that allowed everyone to fully absorb what they had just experienced. Then, slowly, applause began, hesitant at first, then growing louder and more enthusiastic. The audience rose to their feet, cheering and clapping, moved by the depth and authenticity of her performance. She took a small bow, her chest swelling with pride and relief. The famous pianist stood as well, clapping slowly, his face a mixture of admiration and respect. He nodded toward her, a silent gesture of recognition that carried more weight than words could express. Backstage, other musicians whispered among themselves, impressed by her skill and the emotion she had conveyed. She felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that she had not only performed flawlessly, but had also touched the hearts of those who had listened. After leaving the stage, she returned to the quiet corner backstage, her hands still tingling from the piano. She sat down and allowed herself a moment to reflect on the performance. The music had flowed naturally, each note connecting with her own feelings and the audience's response. She realized that the key to her success was not just technical skill, but the ability to convey emotion, to share a part of herself through the music. She thought back to the beginning of her journey, to the small out-of-tune piano in her childhood home, the long hours of practice, and the moments of doubt and frustration. Every challenge she had faced, every sacrifice she had made, had led to this moment. The applause and admiration she received were not just for the performance, but for the perseverance and heart she had poured into her craft. As the day continued, she noticed more people approaching her, offering congratulations, compliments, and kind words. Some were fellow musicians, others were attendees who had been moved by her playing. She responded with gratitude, feeling both humbled and encouraged. The experience reminded her that music was not just about recognition or awards. It was about connecting with others, sharing emotions, and creating moments that could inspire and uplift. Later, she found a quiet place to sit alone, thinking about the famous pianist. His initial mockery had seemed like an obstacle, but it had also fueled her determination. Now, his respect was a reminder that she had the ability to rise above doubt and judgment, to let her talent and passion speak for themselves. She realized that true growth came not from avoiding challenges, but from facing them head-on, embracing the discomfort and trusting in her abilities. As the day drew to a close, she felt a sense of fulfillment and anticipation. The performances had been demanding, the audience critical, and yet she had risen to the occasion. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more competitions, and more moments of self-doubt. But she also knew that she had learned an important lesson. Confidence, persistence, and emotional connection could transform even the most difficult situations into opportunities for growth and expression. She left the concert hall that evening with a light step and a warm heart. The applause still echoed in her mind, a reminder of what she had achieved. The journey was far from over, but she had proven to herself that she could face fear, overcome doubt, and create music that resonated deeply with others. And as she walked through the streets of the city, the cool evening air brushing against her face, she felt a quiet determination to continue pursuing her passion, knowing that her music had the power to inspire, to move, and to leave a lasting impression on the world. The day of the final performance had arrived, and the atmosphere backstage was thick with anticipation. The hall was packed, the audience buzzing with excitement, and she could feel the collective energy even before stepping onto the stage. Today was different. There was a sense of finality, of importance, that made every movement, every breath, feel heavier and more significant. She reminded herself that this was the culmination of all her efforts, a chance to truly show what she was capable of. As she prepared, she thought back to the journey that had brought her here. The long hours of practice, the sacrifices, the moments of doubt and discouragement. All of it had led to this moment. She remembered her family, their unwavering support and encouragement, the quiet gestures that had meant so much over the years. She felt a surge of gratitude and love, a reminder of why she played the piano in the first place. It wasn't for recognition or applause. It was for the music itself, and for the connection it created with others. The famous pianist was already in his seat, watching with a calm, composed expression. His presence was both intimidating and motivating. She had faced his judgment before, had felt his initial mockery, and had earned his respect through her performances. Today, though, she knew that the stakes were higher. This was not just about impressing him. It was about pouring her heart into the music and leaving a lasting impression on everyone in the hall. She walked to the piano with steady steps, her sheet music in hand, and took a deep breath. The lights were bright, the audience silent, and the hall seemed to hold its collective breath. She sat down and placed her hands over the keys, feeling the familiar texture beneath her fingers. The moment was quiet, almost sacred, and she allowed herself to center her thoughts, to focus entirely on the music she was about to create. As she began to play, the opening notes were soft and tentative, drawing the audience in like a gentle whisper. She could feel the story of the music unfolding beneath her hands, a tale of perseverance, hope, and emotion. Each note was deliberate, each pause meaningful. The hall seemed to transform with the sound, the energy shifting as listeners became immersed in the performance. Her confidence grew with every measure, and she allowed herself to fully inhabit the music, letting it guide her fingers across the keys. The piece gradually built, layers of melody intertwining, creating a rich tapestry of sound. She could feel the audience leaning forward, absorbed in every subtle nuance. The famous pianist's eyes were fixed on her, his expression focused, no longer merely curious or amused. There was a recognition there now, a clear understanding that this young pianist was extraordinary. That acknowledgement gave her a renewed sense of determination. She would not hold back. She would give everything she had. The middle section of the composition was the most challenging, a series of rapid passages demanding precision and control. She had practiced these measures countless times, and now, under the pressure of the final performance, her hands moved with fluidity and confidence. The music flowed effortlessly, each note a reflection of her dedication and passion. She could feel the hall responding, the energy of the audience mingling with the energy of the music, creating a shared experience that was almost tangible. Her emotions poured into every chord, her joy, her struggle, her triumph, all woven into the performance. She felt the music coming alive, taking on a life of its own, carrying her story to every listener. The audience was captivated, some swaying slightly, some with eyes closed, fully immersed in the beauty and power of the sound. Even the famous pianist seemed momentarily caught off guard, his usual composure giving way to a subtle, impressed smile. He had expected skill, perhaps even brilliance, but he had not anticipated the depth of emotion she brought to the piano. As she approached the climax, she allowed herself to push the music to its fullest expression. Her fingers moved with confidence and grace, each note resonating with power and feeling. The hall was alive with the sound, the tension and release of the piece drawing everyone into its world. She could sense the anticipation of the audience, the quiet expectation of the final moments, and she poured every ounce of her being into the music. The notes soared and fell, delicate yet commanding, echoing the intensity of her passion and the depth of her journey. Finally, the piece reached its resolution. She held the last note, allowing it to linger, filling the hall with a sense of completion and wonder. For a heartbeat, there was silence, a moment of awe where everyone seemed to hold their breath. Then, the audience erupted into applause, the sound rolling through the hall like a wave. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, moved by the sheer beauty and emotion of the performance. Some faces glistened with tears, others were wide-eyed with amazement, and she felt a surge of fulfillment unlike anything she had ever experienced. She bowed, her chest swelling with pride and joy. The famous pianist rose as well, clapping slowly, his face showing genuine admiration and respect. He approached her after the performance, his expression sincere, and offered words of praise. His acknowledgement was not just for her technical skill, but for the heart and soul she had poured into the music. She felt a quiet warmth spread through her, a sense of validation that went beyond recognition. It was the understanding that she had truly connected with others through her music. Backstage, fellow musicians and attendees whispered among themselves, impressed and inspired by what they had witnessed. She felt a mixture of humility and pride, realizing that her performance had touched others, had created moments of emotion and reflection. She sat down for a moment, letting the applause and admiration settle around her, and allowed herself to fully absorb the experience. The journey, the practice, the sacrifices, the doubts, they had all led to this moment, and it had been worth every step. She thought about the famous pianist's initial mockery and realized that it had been a catalyst for her growth. It had pushed her to focus, to refine her skills, and to play with authenticity and heart. She understood now that challenges and criticism could become opportunities when met with determination and dedication. The respect she had earned was not just for one performance, but for the courage, perseverance, and passion she had shown. As the evening continued, people approached her with congratulations and kind words. She responded with gratitude, feeling both honored and encouraged. The experience reinforced her understanding that music was a bridge between hearts, a way to communicate feelings that words could not express. She realized that this connection, this ability to touch others, was the true reward for her hard work and dedication. Later, she sat quietly alone, reflecting on her journey. The path had not been easy, filled with challenges and doubts, but it had led her to a place where she could express herself fully, where her music could reach and move others. She knew there would be more competitions, more critics, and more obstacles ahead, but she felt ready. She had learned the importance of resilience, focus, and authenticity, and she understood that true success was not only in recognition, but in the ability to share one's passion with the world. As she left the concert hall, the applause still echoing in her mind, she felt a sense of fulfillment and anticipation. This moment was a milestone, a turning point in her journey, but it was also a beginning. She was more confident, more aware of her abilities, and more committed than ever to her music. She walked through the quiet streets, the evening air brushing against her face, feeling a deep sense of purpose and a quiet determination to continue pursuing her passion. She knew that her music had the power to inspire, to move, and to leave a lasting impression, and she was ready to embrace the challenges and joys that lay ahead. The final day of the competition arrived, and she could feel the anticipation buzzing in her chest. The hall was full, the audience eager, and she knew that today's performance would be the defining moment of her journey. She took a deep breath as she prepared backstage, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. The famous pianist would be there again, observing, judging, and perhaps even testing her resilience. She reminded herself that the music was her true guide, that her talent and dedication had brought her this far, and that she could rely on the passion she had nurtured over the years. She went over the final piece in her mind, imagining each note and phrase. This was the culmination of months of practice, determination, and emotional growth. She thought about the countless hours spent in her small room, her fingers moving tirelessly over the piano keys, her heart invested in every melody. She remembered the support of her family, the quiet words of encouragement, the sacrifices made so she could pursue her dreams. These thoughts gave her strength, grounding her in the reality that she had earned this moment through hard work and unwavering commitment. When her name was called, she stood, smoothing her dress and holding her sheet music firmly. The stage lights were bright, and the audience's quiet anticipation made the hall feel alive with tension. She walked to the piano with deliberate, confident steps, feeling the familiar texture of the keys beneath her fingers. She seated herself, took a deep breath, and allowed herself a brief moment of calm. Today, she was determined not only to perform but to convey every emotion, every story, every fragment of her journey through her music. The famous pianist was already seated, his eyes attentive, his posture composed. She could feel his gaze on her, measuring, observing, but she did not allow it to intimidate her. Instead, she welcomed it, using it as a reminder of the standards she had set for herself. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling a rush of energy and connection as the first notes filled the hall. The sound was soft, tender, drawing the audience into the world she was about to create. As she progressed through the piece, her confidence grew. Every note was intentional, every chord shaped with care. She felt the story of the music flowing through her, telling of challenges faced, fears overcome, and the joy of discovery. The audience was captivated, leaning in, eyes fixed, or closing to fully absorb the emotions conveyed. The famous pianist watched closely, his expression shifting from attentive curiosity to evident admiration as he realized the depth of talent and passion before him. The middle section of the piece demanded speed, precision, and agility. She allowed her hands to move naturally, guided by the emotion in her heart. Each rapid passage and subtle nuance reflected the countless hours of practice and the depth of understanding she had developed. The audience remained enthralled, sensing the intensity and sincerity of her performance. The hall was filled not just with music, but with the essence of her journey, the story she had been carrying since childhood. As the performance reached its climax, she poured every ounce of feeling into the final passages. The music soared and fell, tender yet powerful, resonating with the energy of the audience. Each note became an expression of triumph over doubt, over fear, and over the initial mockery that had once been directed at her. The hall was electric with emotion, the connection between performer and audience palpable. Even the famous pianist was visibly moved, his initial skepticism replaced by genuine appreciation and respect. The final notes lingered, soft and delicate, filling the hall with a sense of closure and wonder. For a moment, there was complete silence, a collective pause as the audience absorbed the brilliance of her performance. Then, applause erupted, first tentative, then growing into a wave of enthusiastic admiration. People rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some with tears glistening in their eyes. She took a bow, her heart swelling with pride and fulfillment, knowing that her music had touched and inspired those who had listened. After leaving the stage, she was approached by the famous pianist. His demeanor was warm, his words sincere. He praised not just her technical skill but the emotional depth and authenticity she had conveyed. His recognition was more than validation. It was a reminder that perseverance, dedication, and passion could turn doubt and mockery into admiration and respect. She felt a profound sense of accomplishment, knowing that she had faced challenges and emerged not just victorious but transformed. Backstage, other musicians and attendees whispered among themselves, impressed and inspired. She listened quietly, feeling a mixture of humility and pride. The experience reinforced her understanding of the true power of music, to connect hearts, to express what words cannot, and to leave lasting impressions on those who experience it. She realized that her journey was far from over, but she had taken a decisive step forward, proving to herself that courage, authenticity, and talent could create unforgettable moments. She thought about the long path that had led her here, the early mornings, the late nights, the sacrifices, the moments of doubt. She remembered the small, out-of-tune piano of her childhood, the endless practice, and the encouragement of her family. Every challenge had shaped her, every struggle had refined her, and every small victory had prepared her for this moment. She understood now that success was not measured solely by recognition or awards, but by the growth, perseverance, and emotional connection one cultivated along the way. Later, she found a quiet corner to reflect on the journey. She felt a sense of fulfillment and peace, knowing that she had given her best and that her music had reached the hearts of others. She knew there would be more competitions, more critics, more challenges, but she also knew she had the strength and experience to face them. She had learned the importance of believing in herself, trusting her abilities, and staying true to the music that lived within her. As the audience dispersed and the hall emptied, she walked through the quiet streets outside, the evening air cool against her face. She felt a quiet joy, a sense of purpose and determination. The applause, the admiration, and the recognition were all meaningful, but the true reward was the knowledge that she had shared a piece of herself through her music, that she had created moments that would linger in the minds and hearts of those who had listened. She reflected on the famous pianist's initial mockery, realizing that it had been a challenge that pushed her to grow, to refine her skills, and to perform with courage and authenticity. That experience had taught her that obstacles could become opportunities when met with determination, preparation, and heart. She understood that true artistry was not just about technical excellence but about the ability to convey emotion, tell stories, and create meaningful connections. Walking home, she felt a renewed sense of commitment to her passion. She knew that the journey ahead would be filled with both triumphs and challenges, but she also knew that she had the tools, experience, and confidence to continue moving forward. The music within her was a guiding force, a source of strength, inspiration, and purpose. She was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that her dedication and love for the piano could continue to touch and inspire the world. That night, as she lay in bed, she thought about everything she had accomplished, everything she had learned, and everything that lay ahead. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey, the lessons, and the people who had supported her. Most of all, she felt proud of herself for facing fear, rising above doubt, and allowing her music to speak with honesty and heart. She closed her eyes, imagining the melodies that still lingered in her mind, and drifted into sleep with a sense of fulfillment, purpose, and anticipation for the future. The story of her journey, from mockery to triumph, had reached a remarkable conclusion, but it was only the beginning of a lifetime of music, growth, and inspiration.